there have been rumors out about the new Call of Duty is going to be, kind of revealed sometime soonish in the coming weeks. From Sledgehammer Games, it's their turn in that 3-studio rotation for Call of Duty games. But also, like we just said, Battlefront 2 is focusing more boots on the ground from the Empire's perspective. It's also one of the writers from Spec Ops, The Line. Very, very good game. Kind of took a look at what it means to kind of be doing screwed up stuff because you're being told to in war. But Walt Williams is also writing Battlefront 2 with a few other people at EA Motive. But we figured it'd be a good time, because of all this, to talk about our favorite war games, our favorite games about war. Not necessarily like Spec Ops that critique it, but sometimes they're just fun. Like, I don't know, Red Alert 2 is one of my favorite games. Just fun. And that's a really dumb look at war. It's like you have Yuri's, like in the expansion, Yuri's Revenge, you have this faction that kind of has like brain control shit. And then you have Tanya. You can have an army of Tanyas crawling across with C4s blowing up base. But we already mentioned it. I want to talk about Spec Ops The Line quick because we talked about it so much. Have you guys all played it?
No, but I watched Chris Waters' wonderful video review this morning. I miss that guy.
Yeah.
He knows how to write a beautiful script.
Yeah. It's a really cool game. To pimp something that Jake Decker and I are doing, our next episode of Reboot, the show we've been working on, is about war in games and kind of games that portray it well, games that critique what it means to be playing a soldier in a game and whether it should be fun and, I mean, how they make war games fun in general. But also, we talked a lot about Spec Ops, and this is an important game in that I know the statute of limitations is probably lifted, but I still am hesitant to...
It's a generation old.
I know, but I'm still hesitant to spoil this if you're watching now and you haven't played it, just because the ending is super integral to the game and why it's important. I mean, if most people probably played it.
I vote not spoiling it, personally.
It's cool. It makes you actually... It's kind of the Bioshock of war games almost. It examines what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're doing what you're told and how you factor into like screwed up things that are really happening despite the fact that it's a game. And it's just a fun game, but then, they kind of call you out for thinking that, but it's a really good game. And like I said, same writer as Battlefront 2's campaign, one of them, Walt Williams. This is from developer Jaeger. But Callie, you said you played this.
I mean, you've said most of the things I want to say.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, I like an examination of why we find this sort of thing fun. I mean, I grew up playing shooters, which is a weird sentence, and it's important to reflect. I think it's important to reflect on why you enjoy that sort of thing, and it was important for me at least. So.
Sorry, he was just doing a really unrealistic thing. There's a dog right there.
Yeah, I was like...
That is super weird. Did you see that? We were talking about Mitch Dyer writing Battlefront, and then in this video review in the lobby, it was Chris Waters and Mitch Dyer.
Really?
Whoa!
That's weird.
What's up, Mitch?
Yes, but anyway, we are... Yeah, like I said, if you get the chance on Sunday, go check out Reboot at 3 p.m. We talk more about Spec Ops. But it's also, one last thing, it's kind of based around Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness, kind of looking at going down this like long river to Colonel Kurtz or whatever, this AWOL general. Anyway, Callie, you want to talk about Modern Warfare?
I really want to talk about Modern Warfare.
A game that we all hate. No, I'm just joking. I love this game.
I mean, I played Modern Warfare Remastered, obviously, and I think it's aged really well. My favorite mission is, and I don't care about spoiling this because it's not the end, is when you have to save the helicopter pilot. The helicopter's crashed, and
I think it's called Charlie Don't Surf. Is that the same one?
Is Charlie Don't Surf the one before? I think it is.
This is Charlie Don't Surf right here. So you might be right.
So it's the one right before. You have to save her, and there's a time limit, and no matter how quickly you do it, you get nuked anyway. You die anyway. And when I first played this game, I hadn't really played a game where like I couldn't succeed. And I just sat there and thought about it for a really long time, I remember. And when I played it again, having come off of, Black Ops 3 or even Infinite Warfare, where you're like super powered and you can do anything and you're moving really quickly. You go to Modern Warfare and you're clambering over shit and like you are getting bombed out and you have to like really, you have to really try, especially if you're playing on hardened or veteran. And I just liked that slowdown. I liked going back to something that felt more human than being able to wall run and jetpack out of whatever situation. Like you can't jetpack out of this,
Aww.
Yeah, to segue, actually, you just remind me of this mission, but where I was going to go into was, again, not by any means realistic, but like Halo Reach had that same ending. And as a huge Halo fan playing that game, it was the first time where, you play as Master Chief or even Arbiter, these really overpowered super soldiers. In that game, you had a squad. You had people that weren't just generic scripted, grunts from aliens who just had the same like 2-3 lines. These are people who were like sacrificing their lives like for you, and one by one, like the last few hours of that game were like, as again someone who's playing that series was like, this is uncomfortable in a good way, and it ended with you basically dying, like you it turned into like a horde mode or a zombies even, right? Like you're the ending, right? You're gonna die. And
here it is right here. Your Noble 7 and your visor starts to crack more and more.
Yeah.
Because by this point, Catherine Halsey, the scientist that's kind of in charge of the Spartan program, and you're transporting Cortana to the dropship to give to, you find out later, Master Chief. This takes place right before they do the slip space jump, the random one, which you're not supposed to do because you have no idea where in the universe or the galaxy you'll end up, but they end up at Halo, and then Pillar of Autumn mission starts from Halo Combat Evolved. And there's that Easter egg in the cutscene, if you hold the stick to the right, you can look over and see Master Chief in his cryo.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool. This game is fantastic. Again, we keep mentioning it, but it's almost like that Saving Private Ryan. It's a small squad with personalities. Yeah. So when someone dies, you feel it all the more. It's like the Vin Diesel scene, which sucks in Saving Private Ryan, or forget what's the one-on-one scene with the knife, with the stabbing. That part's always tough to watch. But this game gets pretty emotional. It's really impressive that the whole time you're going to lose in the end, but it's still fun throughout.
Yeah, and some people on your squad like didn't necessarily die very heroic, right? They would just be like a sniper shot from a jackal. Like, geez, like you just it left you with very abrupt like ways of dying, and it was uncomfortable. Yeah.
Going back to Modern Warfare really quickly, there's an achievement for, it's like super early on in the game, but if you're like in a stairwell, and I forget what level it is, but you can get an achievement for like saving this kid, because like an enemy will just come and like stab him, and I did it, and I didn't even know there was an achievement for it. Like I had forgotten, and I don't know what about it. Like everybody in your squad has a name, and I don't know what about it like stuck with me. Like the fact that I saved him on accident, and I was like, oh wow, he could have easily died, and he's not a real person, but like that happens in real life all the time. I don't know what it was. It just really messed me up.
Yeah, someone's mentioning also the No Russian mission from Modern Warfare 2.
I saw that.
Yeah, that was Bushin Ryukat on Twitch was saying, are you guys going to talk about Modern Warfare 2's level No Russian? That was surreal. If you don't know, that's the one where you don't have to start opening up fire, but you're in the airport and you're like undercover with these Russians. You start just shooting civilians in the airport, and you don't actually have to, but they kind of heavily not encourage you, but yeah, you can see it right here, but they kind of heavily say, and then it's kind of like scary. This was also 2008, 2009?
Yeah.
Like what I forget how.
It's, oh my God, it's so upsetting.
That's actually one thing about Modern Warfare. Again, we talk a lot about that on Reboot this weekend. It was weird. My brother did 3 tours in Iraq with the Marines and then 2 in Afghanistan. And as opposed to the World War II games that Call of Duty had always done, Modern Warfare came along, and then it's fictional, kind of combines Cold War fears of nukes and Russia being the enemy with terrorism and, like insurgents from the Middle East that you always saw in CNN. But it was weird to be playing a game portraying a conflict that was currently happening. And that was kind of weird. I mean, that was the first time I felt uncomfortable, but then, this came along. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
That is
I don't think they pulled that off at all.
No, it's...
I don't know.
So uncomfortable. I mean, if you were around at that time, it was so controversial that, like, you can opt not to play it.
Yeah.
Like, couldn't sell it in, like, Germany or something. Some European country was like, nah, like, fuck off with that. Yeah, it is a very weird shift. I mean, you start out playing like I personally started out on like Doom and Quake, and then I played like World War II shooters, and then you get into this sort of thing, which is, like you said, like a real conflict that is happening, and you see, the insurgents kill a president, and it's like, it's much more real because it's not as distant as something like World War II. World War II was always like glorified.
It was also like kind of more black and white, I guess, good versus evil.
Well, yeah, it's very easy to be like, we all know the Nazis are evil. It's like, fine. But yeah, there's much more, you feel bad. Like I mean, I love that. I love Modern Warfare. I love that game.
Yeah.
And it also has those dumb military, like, stay frosty Marines things that I'm like, oh, okay. I'm playing Remastered and being like, oh yeah, I forgot when we all thought that was cool.
Yeah, if you're playing Mass Effect Andromeda, there's a classic line where on the ice planet, stay extra frosty.
Oh, yeah.
All right, to crawl out of this depressing hole and also out of that awful bit of writing. Pete, you wanted to mention something a little more that you could
Anytime I get an
have fun with.
excuse, Mike. Yes. Final Fantasy Tactics is a game about war. Obviously, it's sort of like a medieval fantasy sort of thing, so it's not war the way that we've been talking about wars, right? But what it deals with is sort of like, who controls the history books after a conflict, right? Usually the people who win. But when you do that, you sort of lose touch of all the actual events that happen. So this game actually shows you the events as they occurred versus as how history remembers them in this world. And the things that sort of lead to a certain person winning and then rewriting the history books has a lot to do with like class warfare, has a lot to do with how religion sort of inspires people to do things, to cause wars, and something like that. And this game is a little bit hard to follow because especially the naming of a lot of characters and places and events is very rapid and it's very odd. You have characters named Gafgarion, Delita, like things that just sound really, really strange. So you may have to play this game a few times to really get everything, but it's a really curious examination of the manipulation of people, events, and information around war.
You said, I mean, like in strategy games like this, kind of top-down isometric, or I mean, like I wanted to talk about XCOM 2 really briefly because that's the game I always try to talk about when I get the chance. But
you already talked about it once.
Yeah, I know, but I'm gonna again. I always get kind of attached to characters in games like this when I know like all their abilities and their, I don't know, like Fire Emblem comes to mind too, but I know how they play into my squad, my team overall. Do you get the sense from that? Do you actually get attachments to these characters, or are they kind of just these veneers?
Well, you do. I mean, there are some characters that can never die permanently, but most of the characters in your party will, which includes your starting cast and some characters that you pick up throughout the story that are like, like special characters, right? Like one-off classes and stuff like that. But you can even, dismiss troops and stuff like that if you need to make room in your party. And these characters, they all have these like lines that they give where they feel like, what, am I not good enough? Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to let you down. Like, are you really going to cast me aside? And so maybe even if they're not dying, even if you're just shuffling them around, you can feel bad for them.
Your guts are hanging out of your stomach. Clearly you're not good enough. Get out of here. Go die. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that.
But yeah, this is, if you consider the sort of like aspects of, shut up.
Sorry.
The sort of aspects of war that drive something like Game of Thrones, because there is kind of like an overarching war behind all of that, apart from, the wall and all that shit. But, This game is really good in that sort of vein, and really just kind of keeps you guessing from beginning to end in terms of like who's really in control and who is the one who has the most at stake at war.
You've been telling me to play this for a long time. At least I've been telling a lot of people I should.
Yeah.
What's the best way to play this?
I feel like you ask me that every time. It's not on DS.
Damn.
There's like 2 sequels that came out, Tactics Advance and Tactics Advance 2. A2 is on GB Advance, or on DS, but don't play those. Play this one, either the PlayStation Classics version on your Vita, PSP, PS3, or you can also do the War of the Lions, which is sort of like an updated version that is on iOS, PSP, and PS Vita.
Cool. I also, Rob, you already talked about Halo Reach a little bit when we were talking about Battlefront, but there are a couple other standouts that actually kind of take a cool look at war. This War of Mine is more focused on the civilians and how they're affected. It's like an Eastern European conflict, but you have to just survive in these, fuck the war right there. You can see on that rock. But you are civilians surviving in this Eastern European conflict, and you essentially, every time you play, it's kind of a procedural in terms of how long it'll take, but you have to just survive until a ceasefire is called, which is completely out of your control. And you're just kind of you see a Fallout Shelter perspective on this. A lot darker than Fallout Shelter, though. I think Something the Children is the DLC for it, and it introduces kids into it, and you have to kind of take care of them as well. But yeah, you have to decide who your enemies are. Yeah, who I don't know. It's who your enemies are and who your teammates are and how this all factors into how the civilians get affected. Because it's, like kind of talking about how this is their war, the way they perceived it, even though they weren't fighting in the overall conflict. It's also just maybe not fun, but it's also really rewarding. Managing these teams, like kind of you were talking about Final Fantasy Tactics, or I guess XCOM 2, you get attached to these characters throughout each playthrough, and you're like, okay, this person's good at lock picking or cooking. This person is useful for that. But then you start seeing them on a more emotional level, and it's pretty rewarding. I suggest trying that out. It was the PlayStation Plus free game last month, or like 3 months ago, actually. But yeah, it's worth playing if you haven't. Any others that you want to mention that I didn't?
Yes, that reminded me. I want to talk about Papers, Please a little bit. Sorry, John Luke, for not prepping you on that. But yeah, something that's not about actually fighting in the war. And it's also Eastern European, well, like a fake Eastern European country. Papers, Please. If you aren't familiar with it, you have to kind of look at people's documents and either let them across the border or deny them. And if you get, I almost forget how it works, but I just remember being like haunted by the sound effects, because like you can hear like, I don't know. It's like very simple and
yeah, you decide like who you let
simplistic.
through and stuff.
Yeah, but like the act of deciding who you let in.
Yeah, it can be really tough, because in the beginning it's just about making sure that like, okay, I need to have these pieces of information, and they have these pieces of information, so they're good to go. But then people come up and admit to you that like, I don't have my documents, but I'm escaping an abusive husband.
Exactly.
I need to get across the border. Here's like $1,000. Please let me across. And you can do that, but you might get caught.
You don't want to. Yeah, you're avoiding getting caught, and because you are also making a pittance to support your family, and you have to like pay your bills, and it gets really emotional when people are like, please let me in, and you have to like you can see here, you're kind of verifying that they are from where they say they are, and it's so simple, and it seems like a game about doing a menial task would be boring, but I couldn't stop playing it when it came out. It came out like what, 2012, 2013?
Yeah, something around then. Yeah, it's worth checking out. It's easy to play in kind of like bite-sized chunks too, but
it's kind of interesting to think that what seems to be the most tedious and boring job, like I just think of like a guy at the airport, like just checking your stuff, your passport.
What's the game was last year where you're like a customer service rep? I get this call every day.
Yeah.
Less moral implications, but still kind of a similar thing. But yeah, so those are kind of a few of the games we wanted to talk about, whether they were just fun games or kind of took a cool look at war. Again, on Sunday we have something going up about how games portray war and how they might be able to do better based on some of these games.
Bushin?
Ryukat.
The opening Normandy Beach for Frontline. Medal of Honor was one I wanted to say, just because like I think it was like the first time where like I had like my parents watch me play it, and they both were like, wow, video games are kind of cool, or like, pretty intense.
What are you playing?
Yeah, well, that was the one thing, but like it was the first time where she was like, I remember my mom was like, wow, like that's pretty heavy. And I was like,
I think Allied Assault was the first Normandy Beach invasion in a game, and then Frontline came along, if I'm not mistaken. Allied Assault was on PC, Medal of Honor Frontline was
Normandy
PS2.
on the Atari 2600 was pretty.
Yeah.
I had the opposite thing where my dad was like, hey, check this game out, and we played it, and it was intense.
Yeah. But yeah, good call, because that game we were talking, that kind of becomes like a James Bond movie halfway through. You're this undercover agent going into German U-boats and sneaking behind enemy lines and going to that dinner party where you have to be stealthy a little bit, but I guess the stealth's kind of rudimentary in hindsight.
Man, I forgot the entire game, clearly.
Like stealthy about taking food from other people's plates?
Slipping eye drops into people you don't like, their wine. Not that I do that in real life. Anyway, yeah, let us know if we forgot to mention any. Like I said, with Call of Duty announcement supposedly coming soon. We'll know more about that from Sledgehammer Games. Battlefront 2 is focusing more on its campaign this time around, with a couple of writers who have kind of had experience in, like with Spec Ops: The Line. And yeah, we're excited for those. So and Dawn of War, I guess that's more fantasy war, but an RTS game that'll release next week. Our review will be up soonish. Tomorrow. If you're watching this live, it'll be tomorrow, April 20th. Sorry, just kidding.
What does that mean?
420.
What did you do?
what is that?
Nothing. I didn't do anything. All right. Let us know in the comments. Thanks.